President's droids will continue after these messages.
Phew, that was intense. Dear Tim and Moby, we're learning about journalism in school and have to research a famous reporter. Nellie Bly seems pretty cool. Can you tell me more about her? Thanks, Amelia. You picked a great one, Amelia. Nellie Bly is as well known for how she approached stories as for the stories themselves. She didn't just report on current events. Famous piece uncovered the terrible conditions at a psychiatric hospital for women. Back then, they were called madhouses or lunatic asylums, and they weren't very nice places. To get the inside scoop, Bly pretended to be mentally ill. She faked memory loss and acted strangely. She was declared positively demented and sent to the facility at Blackwell's Island. Her resulting article, 10 Days in a Madhouse, was a huge hit. Readers were captivated by vivid details of freezing, filthy rooms, rotten food, and abusive staffers. Well, that's the kind of story that sold papers back then. The era's yellow journalism was all about drama and sensationalism. Writers used shocking details to pull readers in. For a lot of them, it didn't matter if the story was newsworthy or even true. But Bly stood out from her fellow reporters. She didn't make things up to grab people's attention. To get to the bottom of her stories, she put herself in the middle of the action. Even when it came to reporting on dangerous situations. She filed dispatches direct from the front lines during World War I, one of the only female reporters to do so. Bly was just as daring during her time as a foreign correspondent in Mexico. She criticized the nation's dictator for jailing political opponents and reporters. Eventually, she had to flee the country to avoid prison herself. Well, Bly was never one to shy away from taking risks. In one series of articles, she raced around the world to see how fast it could be done. This was more than a decade before the Wright brothers, so you couldn't just hop on a plane. Bly traveled by boat, train, horse, and rickshaw, filing reports by telegraph as she went. It was a hugely popular series. The paper even created a board game based on her adventure. After 72 days and nearly 25,000 miles, she arrived back in New York City. Yeah, it sounds kind of silly now, almost like a reality TV show. But this was 1889, when ladies were expected to have an escort just to go to the store. Taking a solo trip around the globe sent a message that women could accomplish anything, which was exactly Bly's intention. She'd always been frustrated by the limitations placed on women. As a little girl, she saw her mother struggle to keep food on the table after her father died. When Nellie and her brothers reached their teens, they went to look for work. While her less educated brothers easily scored high-paying factory jobs, Nellie was limited to what was considered women's work. Being a tutor or a nanny offered little chance to earn a decent living. Some of Bly's earliest articles focused on the struggles of working women to find challenging jobs, receive fair treatment at work, and earn equal pay. Misogyny, prejudice against women, was a focus of many of her stories, including her investigation of the mental hospital. Many of the inmates weren't even mentally ill. Immigrants were labeled insane just because they didn't speak English. Husbands had their wives committed just to get rid of them. And some women were locked away simply for speaking their minds or violating the unwritten rules that defined how women should act. Calling them insane was a quick and easy way to shut them up. Bly went undercover in other difficult situations in order to break stories. She exposed employment agencies that took advantage of servants, black market traders who bought and sold babies, and widespread harassment of young women by police officers. Her stories regularly sparked public outcries that led to real change. Bly was pioneering a new type of writing, investigative journalism. It's like a cross between reporting and detective work. Investigative reporters go to great lengths to unearth the truth. Some go undercover to get closer to their subjects, like Bly did. More often, it means spending months or even years researching a story. Threats to public health are a common subject of investigative reports, like when factories pollute rivers or companies hide when their products are unsafe. Uncovering that kind of truth can be dangerous. Those in power will often do anything to protect their interests. Political corruption is another big focus, like in the Watergate scandal. That's when President Nixon ran a spying operation against his political rivals. Nixon eventually had to leave office because two journalists refused to give up their search for the truth. In some parts of the world, they would have been imprisoned before they got very far. Our Constitution has specific language to prevent that from happening here. The First Amendment says that the government can't make any laws limiting the freedom of the press. It's no mistake that that same amendment protects our speech. When a reporter asks a politician a tough question or writes about a corporation breaking the law, they're speaking out for all of us. That's why brave people like Nellie Bly are so important. They are our watchdogs, our whistleblowers, our guardians of the... Point taken.
You all know what we have next here. Let's all go to Quizlet.live right now. Quizlet.live right now. So, like I said, we got that short video. We're going to play Quizlet Live 3 rounds. Then we're going to do a reading as a class on should the president be able to block you on Twitter. We're going to see both sides of the issue. Then we're explicitly going to talk about some stuff from the Unit 6 document. But there is your code, folks, 713171. And 27 or so. Missing just a couple of you. You got about 30 seconds to get in, then we're going to do this thing. All right, here we go. Round one. There's your spirit animals, folks, and they're racing. This is it, folks. This one's for all the Tostitos. And they're racing. Last one. That is awesome, my dudes. Would everybody for me open up their Schoology page? Should look a little like this. Let me share my screen here. So here's what it looks like for you. You've got two folders open under the executive branch. This is the document we've been working on. This is your Unit 6 document. Yes? Good. Go ahead and open that one up if you'd like to, but here's what I'm going to be doing right now. I'm going to be opening up this document right here. Should the president be allowed to block you on Twitter? Because this is one of the readings that we have to do for this Unit 6 doc. So I'm going to download a copy of that, and I'm going to open it up so that it's a little bigger for me so that I can read it for you, and I'll pull it over here. But that's what it looks like, folks. Try to find that one real quick if you could. So here we go, a little debate here, both sides of the issue. Should the president be allowed to block you on Twitter? Okay. President Trump has 54. Obviously, this is just a little bit old. This is, I think this was back in like 2018 that this one was written. But anyway, it's written as a contemporary article in that they're going to refer to him as President Trump because he was still president at the time. President Trump has 54 million followers on Twitter. He uses the social media platform to announce policies, attack political adversaries, and promote his administration's accomplishments. He has also blocked some of his critics. Some of his critics from his Twitter account. Okay. The exact number of people blocked by Trump is unknown, but free speech groups say it's at least in the hundreds. Last year, 7 Twitter users who said they'd been unfairly blocked by following Trump's account after they criticized the president filed a lawsuit saying their First Amendment right to free speech had been violated. In May, a federal judge agreed, ruling that Trump's habit of blocking his critics from what is effectively a digital platform, public forum is unconstitutional. The Trump administration has appealed the ruling, so the legal battle will continue. Here, two experts, one from a conservative think tank, the other from a group that defends First Amendment freedoms, debate whether the president should be allowed to block his critics. Yes, says the first one. Okay. Yes, says the first one. The president should be able to block you on Twitter just like anyone else with a Twitter account. A federal judge who held that the president violated the First Amendment by blocking certain followers an account was wrong. The First Amendment, which says that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, prevents censorship of Americans by the government. But Twitter isn't the government. It's a private social media company. So First Amendment protections don't apply in the same way. Some people have argued that Twitter is, in effect, a public forum since it's a medium by which so many people disseminate and receive news and information. And reasoning doesn't hold that reasoning doesn't hold water. To be considered public, the forum has to be owned or controlled by the government, like a public park or a street corner. As a private company, Twitter, not the government, controls the accounts of its 300 million users, including Donald Trump. As its terms of service outline, Twitter may suspend or terminate your account at any time for any or no reason. So even though the president can block individuals from his account, Twitter has the ultimate control of real Donald Trump, the Twitter handle there. But most American citizens have the right to criticize their president. But don't American citizens have the right to criticize the president? Of course. Anyone blocked by President Trump may say whatever they choose about him on their own Twitter accounts or anywhere else on social media for that matter, provided they don't violate the rules that those media have put in place for their users. The First Amendment, however, doesn't require Trump or anyone else to listen to criticism. And that's what the Twitter blocking is really about. Trump has the right to decide who will have access to his account, just like all other users. The fact that he is the president doesn't change that. So let's look at the other side of this. No. One of the core functions of the First Amendment is to protect we, the people, against government censorship. When the government opens up a space for the public to speak, it cannot, under the First Amendment, exclude some people from speaking there simply because the government doesn't like what they have to say. Though the country's founders couldn't have imagined presidential Twitter accounts, they understood that the president must not be allowed to banish some of the views from public discussions simply because he finds them objectionable. This public forum principle applies to digital spaces like Twitter, just as it does to physical gatherings like town halls or school board meetings. President Trump often begins his day by announcing important information on Twitter, such as the resignation of a cabinet member, the appointment of a new FBI director, or his views on Congress. This information instantaneously reaches his 54 million followers, and it often sparks a discussion among them and others on the tweet's comments thread. But when the president blocks a user, that person can no longer reply directly to the president, and other users can't see the blocked person's replies in the stream of reactions to the president's original tweet. The blocked user is excluded from the main current of the political dialogue. This is an example of an old legal concept known as viewpoint discrimination. Traditionally, judges have interpreted the First Amendment as prohibiting viewpoint discrimination by the government, even when the conversation occurs on a privately owned platform. The reason this issue is important is because so many public officials, Democratic, Republican, and otherwise, are using social media to talk to their constituents and to hear their constituents' views. The more that Twitter and Facebook become important public spaces where people communicate with their elected officials, the more important it is that core First Amendment principles aren't left behind. Okay, so I find this article to be relatively interesting in that it shows you both sides of that issue. Obviously, this story has developed even farther and farther in that the former president has been permanently blocked by Twitter for the foreseeable future. And there has been a movement by a very unlikely person. Does anybody know who's been an advocate of allowing his Twitter account to go unblocked? Mike Lindell has been vocal about that, but it's also been Bernie Sanders, somebody who is remarkably on the other side of the political spectrum from the former president. Okay, Bernie Sanders' take on this is, look, even though I don't agree with most things that Donald Trump has said, the fact that we're blocking his Twitter account is kind of a big deal because, as Bernie Sanders was saying, who's next? Kind of an interesting approach, yes? Okay. So I'm not advocating one way or the other here. Like most things, I just wanted you to understand both sides of the issue here. Okay. So let's go right back to Schoology, if we could, please. Okay, right back to Schoology. And open up that Unit 6 document, and what you will see here we are, Unit 6 document. Open up this first one here. Okay. Now, we were able to get a good chunk of this week 1 stuff done early in the week, were we not? Yes? Okay. So we watched this as a class. Everybody answered all these questions, yes? Does anybody have any questions about any blanks they have here? It's okay if you do. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about any of this stuff or where to find this? Because we did this as a class, yes? Okay. What about this? Did everybody get all of these descriptions done? Okay. And this part about the duties of the vice president and succession and all that stuff. Okay. All right. How are we doing here? Okay. You can go ahead and everybody started this game. At least, did everybody do the pre and post questions already? Or are we kind of like some have, some haven't? This is kind of where I expect you guys to be. Okay. So I was going to just kind of play this for the class. It's a little 20-minute podcast, but since I'm seeing so many people having varying degrees of where they are here, I'm assuming that you're going to be able to get this done on your own. All you do is simply click on this. You go down to the podcast. You play this aloud. Plug in your if you've got headphones, AirPods, whatever, go ahead and plug that in. Listen to it. If you don't have that, I could put you out in the hallway and you could listen, have a little more privacy as you're doing that too. We could figure something out there, okay? But that's kind of where we are. That's what we're working on today. And we already read that one as a group, and then look at that. We've already got a stop sign for where we should be at the end of week 1. If you want to move on and start on this stuff, the readings are in there, and you can you can start that stuff, okay? But understand that we are going to be doing that kind of as a class as we go on here, okay? Good. Any questions, thoughts, feelings, or concerns about what we got going on today? Anything from the people online for the good of the order? None? All right, folks. Okay. Reminder that you have until the end of this unit to turn in anything from Unit 5, right? Okay. That includes assessments. That includes your Unit 5 document. Okay, you have until the end of this unit to do that. Okay, so we've got this week on the executive branch. We've got next week after spring break on the executive branch. At that point, we're going to be done with the Unit 5 stuff. So that's where we are. Those of you online, that kind of fulfills your attendance requirement for today.